Hi everyone, my name is Ken. Welcome to This House. Today we are exploring a house built in Lafayette Square in St. Louis, Missouri. It was built around the 1860s and then in the 1970s, artist James King took over this house, stripped it down, and made it his own personal work of art. Every single detail in this house has been handcrafted and is beyond anything you've ever seen. Stick around because we are going to blow your minds. It looks like any normal house on any street in the United States. But once you start looking closer at some of the details, you notice that things are just a little bit strange. This pedestal here, we can see that it's not an actual pedestal. The top of it is made from a fruit punch bowl and a toilet plunger that have both been painted black. As we enter the house, we are greeted by a giant crystal chandelier suspended from a barrel vaulted ceiling, and it is paired with a mirror that also goes floor to ceiling, right to the side of us. As we turn to look forward, we'll see a staircase that is encased by architectural details that just don't seem to make any sense. Now, nothing in this house is quite as it appears to be. As we look closer at the details, we'll start to notice some quirky things. First, we'll enter the sunken living room that is inside of a pyramid-shaped area that is boxed in and blocking the windows from the front of the house. There's actually a skylight that allows light to trickle down into the space and illuminate it. And there are also some interesting details here. The fireplace is actually fake, and there are triangle-shaped speakers built into the walls, as well as custom art that was all made by artist James King. James King was close friends with Bob Cassilly, the primary designer of the City Museum. So as we leave that room, don't even try to keep track of where we are in the house. The use of mirrors in this space exaggerates the proportions and really lends itself to almost a fun house kind of a feel because you get lost so easily. So this, for example, as we follow the architectural elements, this archway, for example, connects to a column, but as we switch to the other side, the details are totally different. So every time you turn a corner in this house, it's like starting over with visual mapping. You don't know exactly where you are. And this is kind of the central room in the house. It has a lot of natural light fed by skylights, and a lot of architectural salvage used as decoration. And as we look around, there are just so many little details to take in. This chandelier, for example, is hanging very low to the ground. We also have original sculpting work by Bob Cassilly. As we look down through the coffee table, we'll notice that it's actually glass that's open to the basement below. So we can look up and we can see straight up into the house from the basement. And as we rotate around, just notice how dynamic the space is. So as we look further around this room, there are even more details to take in. And there are beams that don't make sense. There are pulleys that go to nowhere. There are even this two-story set of shutters right here that open up to a koi pond that kind of serves as a courtyard. This koi pond is just so beautifully decorated and it is so unique. None of these elements really make sense where they are, but they all serve as decoration, and this truly is just one giant piece of art, this house. I wouldn't even call it a house because it really is just like one giant inhabitable sculpture that you can live in, like living inside of a museum or an art exhibit. So the natural light that's being let in, once again, is from a skylight. So we don't actually have any windows in this room that look directly to the outside, though you would never notice it if you weren't looking for the glass panels on the roof. We can look around at even more details and we can start to see how these things were made, how pieces of random debris, of junk essentially, were glued together, nailed together, and made to look like something that they weren't. Now, this isn't to excuse some of the finer things. There are bits of alabaster, there are pieces of marble, old cast iron, engraved wood. It's all over this house, and we can see how the artist has kind of pieced together all of these bits of salvage as none of them quite line up. And here are those pulleys again that don't do anything. It's just a bunch of gears that add even more mystery to the space. And there's also a bunch of artwork on these walls, a lot of architectural salvage. So we can look around and see bits and pieces from the local area, from buildings that were demolished, or even just a collection of porcelain and encaustic tiles that have been framed on the wall, as well as random bits of different buildings that are just kind of taken out of their context and displayed as artwork. There's also a bathroom off to the side here. And once again, just the amount of detail is exquisite. Have you ever seen plywood look so elegant on the ceiling? There are even bits of wood that have been used in place of grout to separate the tiles on the walls in this room. The sinks are completely unique, and the mirror just makes it feel like it is such an enormous space, even though it's really just your average powder room as far as size goes. As we turn the corner, we immediately come into the kitchen, and I want to point out that these rosettes on all of the woodwork are actually the bottoms of aluminum soda cans that have been painted. So that is a really interesting DIY project, and this house is just full of DIY projects. I know you guys are going to see things that I'm not even going to mention, just because there's just too much to cover here. So there is a functional kitchen in this house, and there's a range, a hood, everything. It's not your traditional range by any means because it's built up on a pedestal. There's also a dumbwaiter that goes down to the basement here and a built-in seating area that kind of goes in an L shape around the kitchen with a display overhead. And every inch of this house is just covered in art. So if you are feeling overwhelmed by the details, just skip along with me because every inch of this house is just covered in artwork and custom furniture. And here are those soda cans again on the cabinets used as decoration in the corners, as well as copper countertops and custom backsplash. As we look around this house, we can really see how it embodies the viral hashtag Zillow Gone Wild in the very best of ways. Now, there's another really interesting feature of this house. We are looking straight up into the upstairs bathroom right now. So this house was designed to breathe so that air could flow throughout it, kind of like a natural air conditioning system. It just allows air to more evenly flow throughout the house. And we can even look down to the basement and we can see that the chutes, they don't quite line up, but they still allow for air to breathe. As we head upstairs, there is decorative painting that goes all along the walls, and the colors and the textures immediately start to change whenever you get to the top. This material that's on the wall, I can't even tell you what it is. It's almost like leather the way it feels. And of course, there are more skylights that are cut into the ceiling to allow natural light to come in. And just all of this little artwork everywhere. So here's another piece that was designed by Bob Cassilly, the chief designer of the City Museum in St. Louis. He built this piece to go over the stairwell, and it is just such a unique, organic piece of architecture. And there are just details everywhere. I mean, there are also like no doors in this house, so you just like walk through the beads and you get to the bathroom. And the bathroom is really elegant in its own way. It has all of this dark wood and dark tile, beautiful countertops and mirrors, and just little places to display art. But it really is clean and simple, but just very, very elegant. There's even a clawfoot tub that's kind of in its own separate space over here. And we'll take a closer look at that because it just has some gorgeous details on it. And then this actually does have a window to the courtyard that we saw with the koi pond. So you're still not looking at your neighbor's house if you decide to open up the blinds. As we head down the hallway, there are more pieces of art, more fragments of pottery just displayed on the wall as if though they're in true form. And let's take another look at this because this is just amazing right here. I've never seen anything like this in my life. So we turn the corner and we can notice that we're in a lofted space now. So we're above that central room in the house with all of the beams that we can see below us supporting this area. There's a giant fireplace in this room as well, and it goes floor to ceiling, and also a workspace. So I guess this would kind of be like an office or like a quiet writing area or something. It's not completely closed off to the stair hall, as there's this kind of partition wall here. And as we keep going, we get to kind of like the actual office space in this house. So this would have been like a real workspace where James King could have drawn or made little models, made pieces of art. And we can see that his two workspaces are separated by the living room below, and we saw this earlier, but I think it's important to point out that this is the space that divides the room on the second floor. And over here is just an absolute dream of a drafting studio. We have all these different art supplies, a giant drafting desk, and just everything an artist could ever wish for. So we'll start to head up to the third floor now, and it's really cool how as you head up the stairs, the bottom floor goes out of sight, and suddenly you're in the master bedroom. So this space is very light and open. It also has vaulted ceilings with skylights that allow in a lot of natural light, and the high contrast between the lighter walls and the dark ceilings, the dark furnishings, the built-in bed, it just lends itself to a very euphoric kind of feel, a very ethereal feel. And the visual texture in this room is just like nothing I've ever seen before. It is absolute eye candy. There are little trinkets that are displayed very tastefully, and the color balance in this room is just exquisite. I promise you, being in here is like no space you've ever been in your life. It is absolutely peaceful and completely tranquil. There are even these French doors that open up straight to the outside on the roof, and that brings you to these panoramic views of the city, and we're still not all the way up. So from here, we can start to see kind of how the house is laid up. We can see skylights that allow light to trickle down into the different rooms, the vents from those holes that allow the house to breathe. And as we get all the way up here to the top, we can actually take a seat on the Widow's Walk, and we can turn around and we can see the entirety of the St. Louis skyline from this spot. So this would be a great place to watch fireworks whenever the Arch is having its show during the summer. And just, wow, taking the view from here. It's like being at the top of a wonderland. There are vines growing over the roof, there are vents that are spinning, and then there is an entire city that just adds to the backdrop. It's just breathtaking whenever you're up here. There's nothing else like this in this city. At least nothing residential. The closest thing would probably be the City Museum, which we mentioned earlier. James King was apparently very close friends with Bob Castle, and we can definitely see the influence of Bob Castle's work in James King's work. So let's go ahead and head downstairs, and we're just going to skip through really fast to get to the garden. So this is directly off the back of the kitchen. Whenever you walk outside in the backyard, we lose that sense that we're in a city. We feel like we could just be in our own little chunk of paradise. There are statues and waterfalls and bridges to nowhere, and it is just landscaped beyond anything you've ever seen before. Once again, it's very tranquil, very peaceful. It doesn't sound like a city because of all the birds in the trees and the water flowing around. And let's go ahead and follow this stream, because as we follow, we can see every rock has been stacked perfectly. And by the way, this was a flat lot with just nothing in the backyard, so everything you see has been placed by hand and is very intentional. And here's one of those bridges that I mentioned earlier that just kind of goes to nowhere next to another bridge. So we can keep walking through the space, and let's notice how the ground is constantly changing. The bricks are laid out in different patterns. There are works of art that just back up to these garden walls that you couldn't see from just 5 feet ago whenever you were walking up on it. So continuing on, we get to a garden shed, and it is kind of made in a pagoda style, or at least to have some sort of a semblance of a pagoda. And directly across from it is an actual little pagoda shrine, and there is a little footbridge that you can take to cross over to it, and you can see that the bricks here have been stacked in a way that you would not normally stack bricks. The bricks have been used as decoration. And here again we have the aluminum cans on the outside of this pagoda that have been painted. And it's just all these little bitty details that just make this house so special. I want to give a huge shout out to the owner of this house, Fritz McAvoy, for allowing us to come film here. Once again, we were on a very tight time crunch here and only had a few minutes in this house, but I thought it was so worth it to do this video in a different style just so that all of you at home could see how magnificent this work of art is. Which room was your favorite? Let us know in the comments. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you next time on This House.